I never meant to be the villain in someone else's story. It's a weak, pathetic cliché, I know, but it's the only truth I have left to cling to in this 3 a.m. darkness. I'm sitting in a guest room that smells of potpourri and regret. It belongs to Sloane, a woman I once called my friend, but who now offers me shelter with the same reluctant charity one might offer a stray cat they hope will move on soon. The screen of my phone is a cruel, blue-white light, a portal to a life that is no longer mine. Each swipe of my thumb is a tiny flagellation, revealing another photo, another happy comment, another piece of the beautiful world my ex-husband is building without me. The villain doesn't always wear a black cape and cackle into the storm. Sometimes she wears faded nursing scrubs, carries the weight of a $67,000 debt, and scrolls endlessly through the life she threw away. My name is Alara, I am 32 years old, and this is the anatomy of my self-destruction. It began, as most of my significant mistakes did, with an obsession named Julian. He wasn't just a man, he was a lifestyle brand. A pharmaceutical rep with a Tesla, a condo overlooking the city, and a jawline that could cut glass. He was everything I thought I wanted. Our situationship was a masterclass in emotional whiplash. For nearly 3 years, I existed in a state of suspended animation, waiting for his call. I remember one specific Thursday. He'd been ignoring my texts for 2 weeks when he messaged me at 10 p.m. Rooftop bar, my location, now. I had an early shift the next morning, but it didn't matter. I spent 40 minutes I didn't have on my hair and makeup, squeezed into a ridiculously expensive dress I'd bought on a credit card specifically for these occasions, and drove downtown. For 2 hours, he was magnetic. He held my hand, told the bartender to get the beautiful lady whatever she wants, and spoke of a future where we'd travel the world. I felt like the star of a movie. Then his phone buzzed. A message from someone else. He glanced at it, gave me a quick, passionless kiss on the cheek, and said, "I've gotta run." Just like that, the movie was over. I was left to pay for my own cab home, the crippling cost of the dress a tangible reminder of the price of admission to his world. While I was busy auctioning off my self-respect for fragments of Julian's attention, Arthur was just there. He was a landscape, a permanent, gentle feature in the background of my life. I first met him at my cousin's wedding. He was the photographer, a big man who moved with a surprising grace, his camera an extension of his kind, observant eyes. While I was scanning the room for eligible bachelors, he was capturing the quiet tear on my aunt's face. He was solid, real, and in my shallow world, that made him practically invisible. He'd show up at family gatherings, and while others asked me superficial questions, Arthur would remember. "How did that tricky 4 insertion go last week, the one you were worried about?" He'd ask, his voice full of genuine interest. He asked me out 5 times over those years. Each time, I'd offer a polite, flimsy excuse. "I'm sort of seeing someone," I'd murmur, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. Arthur never seemed offended. He'd just offer that patient, knowing smile and say, "Well, the offer stands." There was a quiet confidence to him, a self-possession that came from being utterly comfortable in his own skin, something I couldn't comprehend. I was a chameleon, constantly changing my colors to please Julian. Arthur was an oak tree, rooted and unchanging. I found his stability both baffling and, if I'm being honest, deeply unexciting. Then, the inevitable happened. The Julian chapter slammed shut. He didn't even have the decency to tell me himself. I saw it on his sister's Instagram, a sunny picture of them clinking champagne glasses. So proud of my brother for chasing his dreams in LA. California isn't ready for you. 3 months later, his feed was a curated masterpiece of his new life with a yoga instructor named Serafina. Pictures of them doing acro yoga on a Malibu beach, their bodies perfectly sculpted, their captions filled with nauseating quotes about soulmates finding each other. I was 30, drowning in debt, and suddenly, terrifyingly alone. All my friends were getting married, having babies, posting sonograms and engagement rings. My own feed felt like a monument to my failure. That's when Arthur's quiet stability started to look less like a landscape and more like a harbor in a raging storm. He had his own successful photography business, shooting high-end weddings and corporate events. He owned a charming little house in a good neighborhood. He was living a real, tangible life, not the mirage I had been chasing. So, when he asked me out again at a mutual friend's anniversary party, I looked at his kind face, thought of my empty apartment and mounting bills, and said yes. I told myself it was a mature decision, choosing substance over surface. But here is the truth, the foundational lie upon which my entire marriage was built. I was petrified of ending up alone, a 30-something spinster, with nothing to show for her life, but debt and faded memories of a man who barely knew she existed. Arthur felt like my last best chance at a normal life. I knew the physical attraction was a problem. It was a chasm I couldn't cross. So, I engineered a solution, a lie so pious it was almost brilliant. Drawing inspiration from a devoutly religious cousin, I sat him down over dinner one night and explained, with practiced sincerity, that I wanted to remain celibate until marriage. I spun a tale about past heartbreaks and wanting our physical connection to be as sacred as our emotional one. He, being the genuinely decent man he was, held my hand across the table, looked me in the eyes, and said he thought it was beautiful. He respected it without question. His respect was a constant, low-grade fever in my conscience. It only made me feel guiltier, and strangely, more resentful. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. It was a crisp autumn evening in our favorite coffee shop, the place we'd had our first real date. He'd hidden the ring inside a hollowed-out book. It was thoughtful, personal, perfect. As he knelt on one knee, the other patrons looking on with sentimental smiles, all I could think was, "This is it. I'm safe now." I cried as I said yes, and everyone, including him, thought they were tears of joy. They were tears of profound, irreversible compromise. The end began, as it so often does, at a party. It was hosted by Sloane, a fellow nurse whose life I simultaneously coveted and resented. She had the handsome surgeon husband, the tastefully renovated craftsman home that looked like it was ripped from a magazine, and 2 annoyingly well-behaved children. It was the kind of effortless perfection that made my own life, built on a scaffold of lies and credit card debt, feel shabby and fraudulent. I didn't want Arthur to come. He'd just finished a huge, lucrative shoot for a tech company's annual conference and was buzzing with creative energy. "Come on, Alara," he'd pleaded, his voice full of a genuine enthusiasm that grated on my nerves. "I want to finally meet these work friends you talk so much about. Put a face to the names." I tried to demur, inventing a headache, but his excitement was a bulldozer. Looking back, I think a dark subconscious part of me wanted to take a match to my 2 carefully separated worlds and watch them burn. I was tired of the performance. The moment we walked through Sloane's professionally decorated front door, I made a beeline for the bar and grabbed a large glass of Sauvignon Blanc. The wine was my armor. To my surprise and mounting irritation, Arthur was an immediate hit. He didn't know anyone besides Sloane's husband, yet within 20 minutes he was holding court by the fireplace. He told a hilarious, self-deprecating story about a bride who insisted her pet ferret be the ring-bearer, complete with a tiny tuxedo. He made it a tale of near catastrophe and comic genius. My colleagues, who had only ever heard my litany of complaints about his snoring or his penchant for leaving camera equipment on the dining table, were captivated. They were laughing a deep, genuine laughter. They were warming to this kind, funny man I had painted as a domestic burden. Even Dr. Alistair Vance, the impossibly handsome cardiac surgeon I harbored a pathetic schoolgirl crush on, drifted over, drawn in by the laughter. He clapped Arthur on the shoulder, genuinely impressed. I felt a hot spike of resentment. This wasn't part of my script. He was supposed to be the awkward, oversized husband I had to apologize for, not the life of the party. Then Sloane brought out the food. A decadent, artery-clogging spread. I watched in what felt like slow-motion horror as Arthur, oblivious to my simmering rage, filled his plate with a mountain of macaroni and cheese, a handful of bacon-wrapped dates, and 3 buffalo wings. Across the room, Sarah, another nurse and my primary co-conspirator in break-room gossip, caught my eye. She gave me a tiny, conspiratorial smirk. It was all the validation my wine-soaked brain needed to tip from resentful to reckless. By my 3rd glass, the world had a soft, dangerous edge. Dr. Vance came over while Arthur was engrossed in a conversation about the merits of different camera lenses. He looked incredible, in a blue button-down that stretched taut across his chest. The wine made me bold. I started flirting, dropping all subtlety. I laughed too loudly at his jokes, let my hand linger on his arm when he said something funny, and kept glancing over at Arthur, almost willing him to see, to react, to show a flicker of jealousy. But he was completely oblivious, happily showing someone photos of the ferret in the tuxedo on his camera. His contentment felt like a personal insult. How dare he be so happy when I was so miserable? That's when Sloane, flushed with wine and hostess pride, suggested a party game. Never have I ever, but with a twist you had to elaborate. The confessions started out tame but grew increasingly personal as the wine flowed. Never have I ever snooped through my partner's phone. Never have I ever lied about how much something cost. Then, someone said, never have I ever faked being too tired for sex. A wave of knowing laughter rippled through the women. When the focus turned to me, I don't know what snapped. It was a perfect storm of alcohol, insecurity, and years of buried resentment. Dr. Vance had just laughed at a joke made by a new pharmacy tech, and I felt a primal urge to reclaim the spotlight. Oh my God, I'm the queen of fake headaches, I heard myself say. My voice a full octave too loud, cutting through the party chatter. The room chuckled, and I took it as my stage cue. The filter between my brain and my mouth had completely dissolved. Like, sorry honey, but when you're breathing heavy just walking up the stairs, I can't exactly get in the mood. A few people laughed, but it was strained, uncomfortable. The energy in the room shifted. I didn't stop. I doubled down, the words spilling out like venom. I mean, I love him, but you want to know the truth? I told him I was celibate before marriage, because I couldn't figure out how to say, I'm not attracted to you, but you're stable and nice. Like, what was I supposed to say? Hey, you're a great guy, but the thought of you touching me makes my skin crawl? The room went dead quiet. You know that record scratch moment in movies? It was like that, but 100 times more visceral, more real. The silence was a physical thing, pressing in on my eardrums. It was the sound of 50 people holding their breath. I turned, a stupid, triumphant smile still plastered on my face, and there he was. Arthur, standing in the doorway between the living room and the kitchen. He had gone to get us refills. In his hands were 2 fresh glasses of wine. The look on his face, it wasn't anger or shock. It was a complete and utter void, a hollowing out of a man who had just had his soul publicly executed by the one person who was supposed to protect it. His hands were shaking so violently that both glasses slipped from his grasp, crashing onto Sloane's expensive antique rug. The red wine spread like a fresh wound, a stark, bloody stain on the perfect cream carpet. Dr. Vance cleared his throat and suddenly remembered an urgent phone call he had to make. Sarah stared at her shoes as if they were the most interesting things in the world. Sloane, my supposed work bestie, just stared at me, her face pale with disgust, and whispered, Jesus Christ, Alara. The worst part? Arthur didn't yell. He didn't storm out. He just calmly set the broken bases of the glasses on a nearby coaster, walked over to me through the stunned silence, and said, his voice terrifyingly quiet, I think we should go home. The car ride was a vacuum, not the angry, tense silence after a normal fight, but a heavy, final silence. It was the sound of an ending. During that 20-minute drive, I frantically rehearsed apologies and justifications in my head, but the suffocating stillness in the car told me it was useless. The damage wasn't just done, it was catastrophic. I tried to fill the silence in the car with the flimsy putty of excuses. It was a stupid game, Arthur. Everyone was drinking, saying crazy things. You're being too sensitive. He just kept his eyes fixed on the road, his knuckles bone white as he gripped the steering wheel. He didn't say a single word, and his silence was a far more damning indictment than any shouting match could have been. When we got home, the air in our house felt thick and strange, like a storm was about to break. I braced myself for the fight I thought we needed to have, the emotional tornado that would clear the air and allow us to start gluing the pieces back together. Instead, he walked past me, into the bedroom, and opened his closet. The calm deliberation of his movements was more unnerving than any rage. I've been working with a therapist for the past 6 months, Alara, he said. His voice was flat, devoid of the warmth I had always taken for granted. He pulled a large suitcase from the top shelf. Not just about my weight, though that was part of it. We talk about us, about the way you make me feel. I just never had the courage to admit, even to myself, what I knew deep down. My blood ran cold. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. What are you talking about? A therapist? He turned to face me then, And for the first time, I saw not the gentle, accommodating man I had married, but a stranger. His eyes, usually so full of soft kindness, were full of a sorrow so deep it had hardened into steel. "I know everything," he said, each word a carefully placed stone. "I know about the credit cards. I know you've been lying about our finances since we got engaged. I know the things you say about me to your friends at work. And I know you only married me because Julian moved away." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was as if he had reached into my soul and pulled out every one of my ugly, secret truths. "How?" I finally managed to whisper. "Sloane's husband, Mark? He does commercial contracting. We worked on a project together a few months ago. He's a good guy. He heard things from Sloane, things you'd told her in confidence. He was worried about me. He pulled me aside one day and told me to be careful, that the way you talked about me wasn't right." He paused, taking a breath that seemed to pain him. He told me what he'd heard. About my eating habits, my snoring, my performance in bed. Everything you served up for your friend's amusement. He knew. He had known for months. Every snide comment I'd thought was so clever, every time I'd flinched from his touch, every lie about a late shift, he had absorbed it all, processed it in therapy, while I remained blissfully ignorant in my casual cruelty. "I kept telling myself it would get better," he continued, his voice scarily calm as he folded a shirt with meticulous precision. "I thought if I just tried harder, if I lost the weight, if my business made more money, you'd finally see me. You'd finally be proud of me. But that's not the problem. Is it, Alara? The problem is, you never saw me at all. You only ever saw a solution to your problem of being alone." My defenses, pathetic as they were, flared up. "You had people spying on me? You violated my privacy. Why didn't you confront me about the credit cards if you knew?" It was a desperate, gaslighting attempt, and we both knew it. He stopped packing and looked at me, a flicker of the old sadness crossing his face. "Because I was hoping you would tell me yourself." I was still holding on to this stupid, naive hope that the person I fell in love with was still in there somewhere, and that she would eventually choose to be honest with me. He zipped the bag with a sound of finality. "Where are you going?" I demanded, my voice cracking with a raw panic I hadn't expected. "You can't just leave. We need to talk about this." He turned to me at the bedroom door, his face a mask of resolute exhaustion. "No," he said, the words sharp and definitive. "We needed to talk about this 2 years ago, before you married me under false pretenses. We needed to talk about this every time you made a joke at my expense and I pretended to laugh along. We needed to talk about this before you systematically humiliated me in front of everyone I was trying to impress for your sake. But now, I'm done talking." He walked out, and the soft click of the front door closing behind him echoed in the silent house. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The next day, I called in sick to work, hiding under the covers like a child. When I finally dragged myself in on Monday, the atmosphere was arctic. Conversations didn't just stop when I entered the break room. People physically turned away. They avoided my gaze in the hallways. I was a social leper. My manager, Margaret, called me into her office, her face a carefully neutral mask. "It's not personal, Alara," she said, her tone making it clear it was absolutely personal. "But we feel a change of scenery would be beneficial for the team's morale. We're reassigning you to the geriatric ward, effective immediately." It was a demotion in all but name, a quarantine designed to isolate me from Dr. Ward, Vance's prestigious cardiac unit, and the colleagues who had witnessed my spectacular self-destruction. I cornered Sloane in the supply closet, desperate for an ally, for someone to tell me it wasn't so bad. She just shook her head, her expression a mixture of pity and weariness. "You don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice low. "It's not just what you said at the party, Alara. It's the fact that for the last 2 years, we've all been enabling your behavior. Every time you came to us complaining about Arthur, we should have called you out. We should have told you that you had a good man and you were lucky. But we just nodded along. We vent about our husbands leaving socks on the floor. You systematically dismantled that man's self-esteem for sport, and now you're playing the victim because it blew up in your face." She walked away, leaving me alone with the smell of antiseptic and the full weight of my disgrace. The public shaming wasn't over. It had just found a new, more official venue. A week later, A courier in a crisp uniform walked onto my new ward during the morning medication round. He held a clipboard and scanned the chaotic scene before calling out my name, Alara Reynolds, loud enough for every nurse, doctor, and conscious patient to hear. He handed me a thick manila envelope with the practiced indifference of someone delivering a pizza. I stood there, frozen, the envelope feeling as heavy as a tombstone in my hands. My colleagues averted their eyes, a silent, collective cringe passing through them. It was divorce papers, served to me at the nurse's station like a public flogging, a final, clinical severing of our ties. I fled to the staff bathroom, my hands shaking so badly I could barely tear the envelope open. The meeting with my lawyer was a brutal awakening from a nightmare I had authored myself. I had hired the cheapest family law attorney I could find, a weary woman named Brenda, whose office smelled of stale coffee. Arthur, it turned out, had hired one of the best firms in the city. His lawyer had compiled a dossier that was as meticulous as it was damning. Brenda slid the file across the desk to me. It was thick with evidence. There were itemized credit card statements for 3 different accounts Arthur had never known existed. Pages and pages of my secret life, documented in cold, hard numbers. A $2,000 handbag from a trip to Chicago I'd claimed was a nursing conference. Hundreds of dollars in lunches at fancy restaurants I'd eaten at alone. A membership to a high-end gym I'd attended exactly twice. There were screenshots of text messages between me and Sarah. In one, I had sent her a photo of the healthy dinner Arthur had proudly made, with the caption, "Rabbit food. He actually thinks this will work." In another, I complained, "He tried to initiate last night. Had to pretend I fell asleep mid-sentence." The struggle is real. They had everything. It was a complete, irrefutable chronicle of my contempt. "Do you know how much the total debt is?" Brenda asked, her face grim as she tapped a final summary page. I had been juggling balances, opening new cards to pay off old ones, living in a state of willful financial ignorance for so long I'd lost track. We added it all up, $67,421. Arthur's petition requests that you be held solely responsible for all debt incurred fraudulently during the marriage, she explained. Frankly, Alara, given the documented evidence of financial and emotional abuse, he's being extraordinarily generous by not suing you for more. He could probably make a case that would put your nursing license in jeopardy. Oh, my world, which had been shrinking for weeks, now felt like it was collapsing in on me. My professional life was a disaster, my friendships were ashes, and my financial future was a smoldering crater. That night, back in Sloane's guest room, fueled by a morbid, self-destructive curiosity I couldn't resist, I did something I had been avoiding. I typed Arthur's name into the Instagram search bar. His profile, once a quiet collection of artistic landscape shots and pictures of our cat, was now transformed. It was like looking at a stranger. His professional page was booming, but it was his personal page that knocked the wind out of me. The man on the screen was sculpted and confident. He'd lost nearly 40 pounds, and it wasn't just the weight. It was the way he carried himself. There were progress photos at the gym, his face gleaming with sweat and determination. There were videos of him meal prepping rows of healthy food in our old kitchen. There were pictures of him hiking on trails I'd always claimed I was too tired to explore with him, smiling at the summit, the city sprawling behind him. There was a light in his eyes, a genuine, unforced confidence I had never seen before. Or perhaps, more accurately, I had simply refused to see it. His entire brand had pivoted. He was now doing a series on Instagram called the SelfWorth Project, featuring stunning before and after portraits of clients who had overcome personal struggles, divorce, illness, career changes. It was powerful, moving, and it was going viral. The comments section was a tidal wave of admiration. "So inspiring, Arthur. You're a king for leaving a toxic situation and finding yourself. This is the best glow-up I have ever seen." There were hundreds of comments from strangers, but the ones that cut the deepest were from our mutual friends. Katie, who I'd considered one of my closest friends, had commented, "So proud of the journey you're on, Art. You deserve all the happiness in the world." He was healing. He was thriving. He was turning the very pain I had inflicted upon him into a source of strength and inspiration for thousands of people. And I was the unnamed, faceless villain in his heroic backstory. The catalyst for his transformation, the The toxic situation. He had so bravely escaped. The irony was so bitter it felt like poison, and I was choking on it. My life devolved into a grim, exhausting routine. 12-hour shifts on the geriatric ward, where the quiet dignity of the dying served as a constant, humbling rebuke to my own petty dramas, were followed by 5-hour shifts driving for DoorDash. My car, once a symbol of my independence, became a mobile prison smelling of cold French fries and regret. Every dollar I earned was a single drop in an ocean of debt. I moved out of the house we had shared, his house, now, and into Sloane's guest room. She had offered out of a lingering sense of duty, but the space between us was thick with her unspoken disapproval. We were roommates, not friends. One rainy Tuesday night, a delivery order took me to Aperture, a trendy, new downtown restaurant I'd only read about in aspirational lifestyle magazines. The kind of place Julian would have taken me. As I stood by the host stand, dripping wet and clutching a thermal bag containing someone else's seared scallops, I saw them. Arthur was sitting at a corner table, bathed in the warm, flattering light of a filament bulb. And he wasn't alone. With him was a woman with an easy, natural beauty. She wasn't an Instagram model with perfect makeup and filtered skin. She was something more real, more intimidatingly authentic. Her hair was pulled back in a casual knot. She wore minimal makeup, and she laughed with her whole body, tilting her head back in a way that was completely unself-conscious. I found out later she was a pediatric surgeon. Of course she was. She placed a hand on his arm as she laughed, and the gesture was so simple, so comfortable, so full of an easy intimacy we had never shared in 2 years of marriage. He looked incredible. It wasn't just the weight loss, which was now closer to 60 pounds. He wore a stylish dark sweater that fit him perfectly, his hair was cut differently, and he radiated a calm, happy energy that seemed to light up his corner of the room. I stood there, frozen, a ghost at the feast of my former life, clutching a bag of cooling food. Then he saw me. His eyes met mine across the bustling restaurant. For a split second, I saw a flicker of something surprise, maybe a ghost of pain, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. He schooled his features into a polite, distant neutrality. There was no anger, no triumph at seeing me so low in my stupid DoorDash jacket. There wasn't even pity. He gave me a single, curt nod, the kind you give a former high school classmate you barely remember, and then he did the most devastating thing of all. He turned back to his date, back to her smile, back to his life, and I ceased to exist. That polite dismissal, that complete and total erasure of my significance, hurt more than any curse word ever could. The universe, it seemed, had a penchant for cruel cinematic ironies. A week later, I ran into Julian at the grocery store. He was in town for a conference, looking just as polished and annoyingly handsome as ever. He was standing in the cereal aisle, contemplating a box of organic granola. "Alara," he said, his eyes doing a quick, dismissive scan of my tired appearance and my basket full of budget pasta and canned soup. "Heard about you and Arthur. Bummer." I braced myself for some meaningless platitude, some hollow offer of sympathy. Instead, he leaned against the shelf, crossing his arms. "You know, I saw him at the Equinox gym the other day. Man, he looks incredible. Got to talking with him. He's a really great guy. Solid. Can't believe how you treated him." I just stared at him, my hand frozen on a box of generic Cheerios. The world tilted. Julian. The man whose validation I had craved for years. The man who was the very reason I had settled for Arthur in the first place, was now standing here, judging me. He was on Team Arthur. Everyone was on Team Arthur, and the terrible, sinking truth was that they were right to be. I walked away without a word, pushing my squeaky cart down the aisle, the full, crushing weight of my misjudgments finally settling in. The final divorce decree came in the mail, a thin, impersonal envelope that ended my marriage with the stroke of a judge's pen. It was a clean break, just as the lawyers had promised. He took the house, assuming the mortgage we'd taken out together. I took my $67,421 of debt. My lawyer had urged me to sign without a fight. "He could ruin you, Alara," she'd said, her voice devoid of sympathy. "He has proof of everything. He's choosing not to destroy you professionally. Take the mercy and go." The mercy felt like a life sentence. I was 32, living in a spare room that wasn't mine, working 2 soul-crushing jobs where I was either pitied or hated. and facing a mountain of debt that would take me the rest of my adult life to climb. Bankruptcy was an option, a dark cloud looming on the horizon, but it would mean a formal review of my character and could result in the suspension of my nursing license. I was trapped in the prison I had built for myself. A few weeks ago, a nurse I barely knew from the oncology ward forwarded me a link without comment. It was a trailer on YouTube. Some independent filmmakers, inspired by Arthur's viral transformation story, were making a documentary about his journey. It was titled Unburdened. The trailer was a slick, emotional 2-minute montage. It opened with a shot of a scale, then cut to Arthur, heavier and sad-eyed in an old photo from our wedding. Uplifting music swelled as it showed him sweating through grueling workouts, carefully preparing healthy meals in our old kitchen, and then, finally, standing confidently on a mountaintop. Interspersed were clips of him speaking eloquently in a well-lit studio. "You have to understand," his voiceover said, "that sometimes the weight you need to lose isn't on your body. It's the weight of someone else's expectations, someone else's cruelty." He was going to be the face of healing from emotional abuse, and I, forever unnamed but heavily implied, would be the cautionary tale, the before picture in his perfect afterstory. Last night, I hit what I pray is rock bottom. I was scrolling through Instagram, a masochistic ritual I can't seem to stop, when I saw Arthur's latest post. It was a photo of him and his new girlfriend, the brilliant, beautiful pediatric surgeon, crossing the finish line of a half marathon. They were sweaty, exhausted, and incandescently happy, their arms wrapped around each other, medals hanging around their necks. His smile was the most genuine, joyful thing I had ever seen. The caption twisted the knife and then broke it off. It was a long, heartfelt paragraph about finding unexpected joy after hardship, about how the worst things that happen to you often lead you to the best things. The comments were a chorus of adoration, but it was his girlfriend's comment, a simple string of heart emojis, and his reply to her that finally broke me. He wrote, "At Dr. Lena Hayes, thank you for showing me what real love feels like. The kind that builds you up, not tears you down." I threw my phone across the room. The sound of the screen cracking against the wall was barely audible over the sound of my own ragged, ugly sobbing. My sister calls me every Sunday and tells me I need therapy, that I need to work on myself, that I need to figure out where all this insecurity and cruelty comes from. She's probably right. But every time I think of sitting in a quiet room, talking to a stranger about my feelings, I remember that Arthur was in therapy because of me. I imagine a therapist out there with a thick file labeled Arthur Reynolds, a file full of notes detailing every cruel thing I ever did, every passive-aggressive joke, every way I made him feel small and unloved. A professional, clinical record of my monstrosity. So yes, that's my story. How one drunken, hateful joke at a party wasn't a beginning but an ending, the final, public unraveling of a life built on deceit. I lost my husband, my friends, my reputation, and my financial stability because I couldn't appreciate the quiet, steady, unconditional love that was right in front of me. If I could go back, would I do things differently? It's the question that haunts me in the suffocating silence of 3 a.m. The answer is yes, of course. But not for the noble reasons everyone wants to hear. Not because I've had some grand epiphany about inner beauty and the value of a good heart. I'd do things differently because I was a fool. A short-sighted, materialistic fool. I didn't realize that the safe choice, the backup plan, the nice guy I settled for, he was the prize. He was the catch of a lifetime. And now, someone else is living the life that could have been mine. While I'm here, alone in a borrowed room, watching through the cracked screen of my phone as my ex-husband becomes an inspiration, the worst part, the thought that keeps me awake more than any other, is the realization that he didn't just become everything I wanted after me. He was everything I needed all along. And I was the one, and will always be the one, who wasn't good enough.